The humid morning air of General Santos City carried the familiar scent of dried fish and coconut oil as Manny Pacquiao stepped out of his black SUV. His security team positioned themselves discreetly around the vehicle while he adjusted his simple white polo shirt and khaki pants. Today was different from his usual training sessions or political meetings. Today was about returning to the place that shaped the boy who would become a legend. The drive to Sarangani province had been filled with silence, broken only by the rhythmic hum of tires against weathered asphalt. Manny gazed through tinted windows at landscapes that triggered a flood of childhood memories. Coconut trees swayed gently in the tropical breeze, their fronds casting dancing shadows over small wooden houses with corrugated metal roofs. Children ran barefoot along dirt paths, their laughter echoing the joy he once knew despite the grinding poverty that defined his early years. As they approached the remote barangay of Kiamba, Manny's chest tightened with emotion. Nothing had changed much since he left this place decades ago, chasing dreams that seemed impossible for a boy who often went to bed hungry. The same narrow roads wound between modest homes, where families gathered on bamboo porches to escape the afternoon heat. Elderly women still sat weaving baskets from dried coconut leaves, their weathered hands moving with practiced precision, passed down through generations. The SUV slowed as they reached the elementary school where Manny had spent some of his most formative years. The concrete building stood weathered but proud, its faded yellow walls bearing the scars of countless typhoons and tropical storms. A rusty basketball hoop hung from a makeshift post in the small courtyard, where children currently played with a deflated ball, their uniforms patched and worn but clean. Manny closed his eyes and could almost hear the voice that had changed his life forever. Mrs. Dolores Santillan had been more than his fourth-grade teacher. She had been the first adult to see potential in a skinny, malnourished boy who frequently missed school to help his mother sell cigarettes and boiled peanuts on street corners. While other teachers sometimes showed frustration with his irregular attendance, Mrs. Santillan had quietly encouraged him, never making him feel ashamed of his family's circumstances. The memory was crystal clear. A rainy afternoon when young Manny had arrived at school completely soaked, his torn shoes squishing with each step. His stomach had been cramping from hunger, and he had tried to hide his discomfort by resting his head on his desk. Mrs. Santillan had noticed immediately. Without drawing attention to his situation, she had gently guided him to her small desk and shared her simple lunch of rice and dried fish. She had wrapped the remaining portion in banana leaves for him to take home. That act of kindness had planted a seed in Manny's heart that grew stronger with each passing year of success. Even as he conquered boxing rings around the world, earning millions of dollars and international acclaim, he never forgot the teacher who had fed him when he was hungry and believed in him when others saw only a poor boy with limited prospects. Now, 35 years later, Manny carried with him the power to transform lives the way Mrs. Santillan had transformed his. His recent investigation had revealed that his beloved teacher, now 72 years old, was living in a small wooden house with a leaking roof, struggling on a minimal pension that barely covered her basic needs. The discovery had kept him awake for several nights, planning something that would honor the woman who had shaped his character during those crucial childhood years. The SUV came to a complete stop outside the school gates. Manny took a deep breath, feeling the weight of gratitude and determination settling in his chest. Today would mark the beginning of a surprise that would change Mrs. Santillan's life forever. The school principal, Mrs. Isadora Fernandez, nearly dropped her cup of coffee when she spotted the familiar figure walking through the gates. Her hands trembled slightly as she recognized the man who had brought honor to their province, the same boy who had once sat in these very classrooms with holes in his shoes and dreams bigger than the poverty surrounding him. Manny moved quietly through the corridors, his footsteps echoing against the polished concrete floors that had been recently mopped by the janitor, Arturo Valdez. The walls displayed faded photographs of previous graduating classes, and Manny paused at one particular image from 1985. His young face stared back at him from the third row, significantly thinner than his classmates, but his eyes held the same determined spark that would later captivate boxing audiences worldwide. The classroom where Mrs. Dolores Santillan currently taught second grade was located at the end of the hallway. Through the open doorway, Manny could hear her gentle voice guiding her students through a mathematics lesson. Her teaching style remained unchanged after all these years, patient, encouraging, and filled with genuine care for each child's individual progress. Mrs. Santillan stood at the blackboard, her silver hair neatly pinned back in the same style she had worn decades earlier. At 72, she moved with slight difficulty, her arthritis evident in the way she gripped the chalk and carefully wrote numbers on the board. Her simple blue dress was clean, but showed signs of frequent washing and mending, a testament to her modest circumstances. The children in her class came from families similar to Manny's own background, fishermen, farmers, and street vendors who worked tirelessly to provide basic necessities for their families. Some students wore uniforms that had been passed down from older siblings, while others had shoes held together with tape and wire. Mrs. Santillan treated each child with equal dignity, never allowing their economic circumstances to diminish her expectations for their potential. Manny waited patiently outside the classroom until the lesson concluded and the children filed out for their lunch break. Many of them recognized him immediately, their eyes widening with excitement as they whispered to each other about the famous boxer standing in their hallway. However, they maintained respectful silence, sensing the solemnity of the moment. When Mrs. Santillan finally looked up from organizing her teaching materials, she froze completely. The years seemed to fall away as she gazed upon the man who had once been her most vulnerable student. Her weathered face broke into a radiant smile that illuminated the entire classroom, and tears began forming in her eyes as memories of their shared past flooded back. The reunion was profound in its simplicity. Mrs. Santillan approached slowly, studying Manny's face as if trying to reconcile the successful man before her with the hungry child she remembered. Her small frame seemed even more delicate next to his athletic build, but her presence commanded the same respect it had when he was 9 years old. Manny bent slightly to embrace his former teacher, careful not to overwhelm her with his emotion. The hug lasted several moments, both of them transported back to those difficult but formative years when kindness had been scarce and hope had seemed impossible. Mrs. Santillan's gentle touch on his shoulder carried the same comfort it had provided during his childhood struggles. As they separated, Mrs. Santillan gestured toward the small plastic chair beside her desk, the same type of chair where she had once shared her lunch with a starving student. The irony was not lost on either of them. The woman who had given everything despite having so little was still giving, still teaching, still nurturing young minds in the same selfless manner that had shaped a future champion. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the classroom windows cast a golden glow over their reunion, highlighting the profound connection between teacher and student that transcended time, success, and circumstances. Mrs. Santillan's influence on Manny's character was immeasurable, and he knew that no amount of money or recognition could ever repay the debt of gratitude he owed her. In that moment, surrounded by the familiar sights and sounds of his childhood school, Manny silently renewed his commitment to changing her life in the most meaningful way possible. After spending nearly an hour reminiscing in the classroom, Mrs. Santillan insisted on showing Manny around the school grounds. Her pride in the institution remained evident, despite the obvious need for repairs and improvements. Paint peeled from exterior walls, and several windows were cracked from recent storms, but the dedication of the teaching staff kept the educational mission alive. As they walked together through the small campus, Mrs. Santillan pointed out various improvements that had been made over the years. A new water pump had been installed, thanks to donations from former students, and the computer laboratory boasted 3 working machines donated by a local businessman named Gregorio Salinas. Her enthusiasm for these modest upgrades revealed how little support the school typically received. The conversation naturally turned to Mrs. Santillan's current life circumstances. She mentioned living alone, since her husband Vicente had passed away 5 years earlier from complications related to diabetes. Their only son, Wilfredo, worked as a merchant marine and sent money home sporadically, but the amounts were barely sufficient to cover her basic medications and utilities. Manny listened carefully as she described her daily routine with characteristic modesty. She woke before dawn to prepare for school, often walking the 2-kilometer distance to save money on transportation. Her afternoon hours were spent tutoring struggling students without charge, believing that education was a fundamental right, regardless of a family's ability to pay. The principal, Mrs. Fernandez, joined them during their tour and quietly shared additional details about Mrs. Santillan's situation. The veteran teacher had refused multiple offers of financial assistance from the school administration and fellow teachers, insisting that others had greater needs. Her monthly pension of 8,000 pesos was stretched impossibly thin, covering rent, food, medications, and occasional school supplies she purchased for students whose families could not afford them. As the school day concluded, Mrs. Santillan gathered her worn canvas bag containing lesson plans and a few personal items. The bag had been a gift from students several years earlier, and despite its frayed edges, she treasured it deeply. Her movements were slower than they once were, and Manny noticed her slight wince when lifting heavier objects. The walk to her current residence revealed the full extent of her modest circumstances. The wooden house where she rented a small room sat precariously on concrete blocks, with gaps between the floorboards visible from the ground level. Rust stains marked where the corrugated roof leaked during heavy rains, and the exterior walls showed signs of termite damage that the landlord had repeatedly promised to repair. Her living space consisted of a single room measuring approximately 3 meters by 4 meters. A narrow bed occupied one corner, while a small table served multiple purposes as dining area, desk, and storage space. Her few possessions were organized with meticulous care: teaching materials in a cardboard box, clothing folded neatly in a plastic container, and a small collection of photographs showcasing decades of students who had passed through her classroom. The kitchen facilities were shared with 3 other tenants, consisting of a single burner connected to a small gas tank and a concrete sink with intermittent water supply. Mrs. Santillan prepared simple meals of rice, vegetables, and occasionally fish when her budget permitted. She had learned to make nutritious meals from minimal ingredients, a skill developed through years of economic necessity. Most heartbreaking was her evening routine of grading papers by candlelight, when the electricity was disconnected due to unpaid bills. Her dedication to her students never wavered, even when circumstances made her job significantly more challenging. She often used her own money to photocopy worksheets, believing that proper educational materials were essential for student success. As Manny observed her living conditions, his resolve strengthened. The woman who had nurtured his potential during his most vulnerable years deserved dignity, comfort, and security in her golden years. That evening, Manny returned to his hotel in General Santos City with his heart heavy from what he had witnessed. The contrast between his current life of luxury and Mrs. Santillan's humble circumstances created an emotional weight that made sleep impossible. He spent hours pacing his suite, replaying memories of the kindness she had shown him when he had nothing to offer in return. The following morning, Manny contacted his personal assistant and began implementing a plan that had been forming since he first learned of his teacher's situation. The project would require absolute discretion and careful coordination to ensure Mrs. Santillan remained unaware until the moment of revelation. He wanted to preserve the element of surprise, while creating something truly meaningful for the woman who had shaped his character. His first call was to Ernesto Magallanes, a respected architect from Davao City who specialized in residential construction throughout Mindanao. Magallanes had designed homes for several celebrities and politicians, but this project would be different. Manny emphasized that the house should reflect dignity and comfort without being ostentatious, honoring Mrs. Santillan's modest nature while providing the security and convenience she deserved. The architect arrived in Sarangani the next afternoon, accompanied by his trusted foreman, Hilario Santos, who had supervised construction projects in remote areas for over 20 years. Together, they surveyed potential locations near the school where Mrs. Santillan taught, seeking a site that would minimize her daily commute while providing a peaceful environment for her retirement years. They identified a perfect half-hectare lot on a gentle hillside overlooking the coastline, owned by an elderly farmer named Modesto Guerrero, who was willing to sell at a fair price. The property offered mature mango and coconut trees for natural shade, fertile soil for a vegetable garden, and stunning views of Sarangani Bay. Most importantly, it was located only a 10-minute walk from the elementary school. Manny personally inspected the site, envisioning the home that would rise from this beautiful piece of land. The design would incorporate traditional Filipino architectural elements with modern conveniences: a spacious living area with high ceilings for natural cooling, a covered veranda perfect for afternoon relaxation, and a dedicated room that could serve as a home library or private study space. The house would feature 2 bedrooms to accommodate visits from her son Wilfredo and potential guests, a modern kitchen with reliable appliances, and a bathroom with fixtures designed for elderly accessibility. Solar panels would provide energy independence, while a deep well would ensure consistent water supply. Every detail was planned with Mrs. Santillan's comfort and dignity in mind. Construction began immediately under a shroud of secrecy. Hilario coordinated with local workers who understood the importance of discretion, including mason Celestino Rivera and electrician Norberto Valdez. The crew worked primarily during school hours, when Mrs. Santillan was teaching, and the site was positioned just far enough from main roads to avoid attracting attention from curious neighbors. Manny visited the construction site daily, monitoring progress and ensuring that quality standards met his exacting requirements. He personally selected materials, choosing hardwood floors from sustainable sources, energy-efficient windows that could withstand typhoon seasons, and a concrete foundation designed to last generations. Every peso spent was an investment in honoring the woman who had invested in his future when he was just a hungry child. The project timeline was ambitious but achievable. Within 6 weeks, the house would be complete and ready for occupancy. Manny planned the revelation carefully, coordinating with school administrators to create a scenario that would bring Mrs. Santillan to the site naturally, without arousing suspicion about the surprise that awaited her. As construction progressed, Manny felt a deep satisfaction that transcended his boxing victories and political achievements. This act of gratitude represented the true measure of success. 3 weeks into construction, the house had begun to take its final shape against the tropical landscape. Manny arrived each morning before dawn, bringing fresh coffee and breakfast for the construction crew, who had become like family during this meaningful project. The workers, led by foreman Hilario Santos, understood they were participating in something extraordinary that went far beyond ordinary construction work. The foundation had been completed with precision, using reinforced concrete, designed to withstand the region's frequent earthquakes and seasonal typhoons. Carpenter Leopoldo Reyes worked with masterful skill, crafting custom wooden features from locally sourced Nara and mahogany trees. His attention to detail reflected the respect he felt for the project's ultimate beneficiary, whom he remembered as his own daughter's teacher years earlier. Manny personally selected every fixture and finishing material, considering how each element would enhance Mrs. Santillan's daily life. The kitchen cabinets were designed at a height that would minimize strain on her aging back, while the bathroom featured grab bars and non-slip surfaces for safety. Window placements maximized natural light and cross-ventilation, reducing the need for artificial cooling in the tropical climate. The roofing installation proved particularly meaningful for Manny, who remembered countless nights in his childhood when leaking roofs had made sleep impossible during monsoon seasons. He insisted on premium materials and multiple layers of waterproofing, ensuring that Mrs. Santillan would never again experience the anxiety of water dripping onto her belongings during storms. Landscaper Mariano Cruz worked closely with Manny to design gardens that would provide both beauty and practical benefits. They planted medicinal herbs that Mrs. Santillan could use for traditional remedies, established a vegetable garden with raised beds for easier maintenance, and created a small orchard featuring her favorite fruits. The design honored Filipino traditions while incorporating modern irrigation systems for sustainability. Interior designer Avelina Domingo helped select furniture that balanced comfort with Mrs. Santillan's modest aesthetic preferences. The living room featured a comfortable sofa, positioned to take advantage of the ocean views, while the bedroom included a quality mattress that would support her arthritis-affected joints. Every piece was chosen with her specific needs and preferences in mind. The most challenging aspect of the project was maintaining secrecy while construction progressed. Several times, Mrs. Santillan mentioned hearing about building activity in the area, but she attributed it to normal development in the growing community. Manny felt moments of anxiety when she expressed curiosity about the project, but her trusting nature prevented her from investigating further. Local suppliers, including hardware store owner Filemon Torres and paint contractor Gaudencio Ramos, were sworn to secrecy about the project's true purpose. The entire community seemed to understand intuitively that something special was happening, and they protected the surprise with the same loyalty they would show for their own family members. As the walls received their final coat of paint in warm, welcoming colors, Manny spent an emotional afternoon walking through the completed rooms. Each space represented a specific aspect of the gratitude he felt toward the woman who had shaped his character during his most vulnerable years. The study area honored her dedication to education, while the comfortable living spaces acknowledged her right to enjoy peaceful retirement after decades of service. The final week of construction focused on details that would make the house truly feel like home. Electrician Norberto Valdez installed ceiling fans in every room, while plumber Saturnino Mendoza ensured perfect water pressure throughout the house. Solar panels were connected and tested, providing the energy independence that would eliminate Mrs. Santillan's worries about utility bills. As completion approached, Manny began planning the revelation that would transform his beloved teacher's life forever. The house stood completed like a beautiful secret hidden among the mango trees, its warm yellow walls and terracotta roof tiles blending harmoniously with the natural landscape. 6 weeks of careful planning and construction had transformed an empty lot into a sanctuary that embodied everything Manny wanted to provide for his beloved teacher. The final inspection revealed perfection in every detail, from the hand-carved wooden railings to the gleaming kitchen appliances. Manny walked through each room one final time, his emotions overwhelming as he imagined Mrs. Santillan's reaction to discovering her new home. The master bedroom faced east to capture the gentle morning sunlight, while the living area's large windows offered breathtaking views of Sarangani Bay. Fresh flowers from the completed garden filled vases throughout the house, adding natural beauty and the sweet fragrance of sampaguita and bougainvillea. The furniture had been arranged with meticulous care by Avelina Domingo, who understood that every placement should reflect Mrs. Santillan's comfort and daily routines. A reading chair was positioned near the window in the study, surrounded by bookshelves that Manny had personally stocked with educational materials and classic Filipino literature. The dining table was sized perfectly for intimate meals or small gatherings with fellow teachers and former students. Security features had been subtly integrated throughout the property to ensure Mrs. Santillan's safety without creating an institutional atmosphere. Motion sensor lighting illuminated pathways and entrances, while the solid construction and quality locks provided protection against both weather and potential intruders. The solar power system included battery backup to guarantee electricity even during extended outages. The kitchen represented the heart of Manny's vision for improving his teacher's daily life. Premium appliances included a reliable refrigerator that would keep her medications properly stored, a gas range with safety features, and a water filtration system providing clean drinking water. The pantry had been stocked with non-perishable essentials, ensuring she would never again worry about having sufficient food. Planning the revelation required careful coordination with school principal Mrs. Fernandez, who would play a crucial role in bringing Mrs. Santillan to the property without arousing suspicion. They devised a story about needing her expertise to evaluate a potential donation of land for school expansion, which would naturally lead her to the new house location. Manny arranged for a small gathering of people who had been meaningful in Mrs. Santillan's life and career. Former students who had remained in the community were quietly invited to witness the surprise, including successful graduates like businessman Amado Herrera and nurse Rowena Pascual, both of whom credited their achievements to her early encouragement and guidance. The local media was carefully excluded from the initial revelation to preserve the intimate nature of the moment. Manny wanted Mrs. Santillan to experience the surprise without feeling overwhelmed by cameras or public attention. This gift was personal, born from genuine gratitude rather than publicity considerations. Photographer Inigo Villanueva, a discreet professional known for capturing authentic emotions, was positioned to document the surprise from a respectful distance. The images would become treasured memories for both Manny and Mrs. Santillan, preserving the moment when years of planning culminated in pure joy. The evening before the revelation, Manny spent a sleepless night reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this point. The skinny, hungry boy who had once sat in Mrs. Santillan's classroom could never have imagined possessing the resources to change someone's life so dramatically. Yet the values she had instilled in him, kindness, gratitude, and responsibility to others, had guided every decision throughout his career. As dawn approached, Manny felt a nervous excitement similar to what he experienced before major boxing matches. However, this anticipation was sweeter because victory would belong entirely to someone else. The woman who had given so much while asking for nothing in return was about to receive a gift that honored her lifetime of service and sacrifice. The afternoon sun cast golden shadows through the coconut palms as Mrs. Santillan walked alongside Principal Fernandez toward what she believed was a potential school expansion site. Her weathered hands clutched a small notebook where she had jotted down thoughts about educational facilities and playground requirements, completely unaware that her life was about to change forever. As they approached the property, Mrs. Santillan paused to admire the beautiful house nestled among the mature mango trees. Her eyes widened with appreciation for the architectural design that seemed to blend perfectly with the natural surroundings. She commented to Mrs. Fernandez about how lovely it would be to live in such a peaceful location, so close to the school, yet surrounded by nature's tranquility. The house appeared to be recently completed, with fresh paint gleaming in the afternoon light and carefully manicured gardens displaying vibrant, tropical flowers. Mrs. Santillan noticed the solar panels on the roof and remarked about how practical and environmentally conscious the owners must be. Her teacher's mind automatically began calculating how wonderful it would be for a family to grow up in such a nurturing environment. Mrs. Fernandez guided her along the stone pathway that wound through the gardens, past the vegetable plots and herb sections that had been planted with particular care. Mrs. Santillan bent to examine the plants, recognizing varieties that she had mentioned to Manny during their recent conversations about traditional Filipino remedies and cooking ingredients. From his position behind a large mango tree, Manny watched with mounting emotion as his beloved teacher approached the front entrance. His heart pounded with the same intensity he had felt before championship fights, but this nervous energy was filled with pure joy rather than competitive determination. The moment he had planned and dreamed about for weeks was finally arriving. Mrs. Santillan stepped onto the covered veranda and gasped softly at the stunning view of Sarangani Bay stretching toward the horizon. The afternoon breeze carried the scent of frangipani and the distant sound of fishing boats returning to shore. She turned to Mrs. Fernandez with obvious admiration for whoever had chosen this perfect location for their home. Principal Fernandez suggested they examine the interior to better understand the property's potential for educational purposes. As Mrs. Santillan approached the front door, she noticed it was slightly ajar, as if inviting exploration. Her natural curiosity overcame any hesitation about entering someone else's home without explicit permission. The moment she stepped inside, Mrs. Santillan stopped breathing. The living room was furnished exactly as she would have chosen for herself, with comfortable seating positioned to maximize the ocean views and natural light. Familiar books lined the shelves, including many titles she had mentioned loving during her teaching career. The overall atmosphere felt unmistakably like home, yet she could not understand why. Her confusion deepened as she moved through the house, discovering room after room that seemed designed specifically for her needs and preferences. The kitchen featured appliances at the perfect height for her frame, while the bathroom included safety features that would accommodate her arthritis. The master bedroom faced east, just as she had always preferred for morning sunlight. In the study, Mrs. Santillan discovered educational materials and teaching resources that she had only dreamed of owning. The desk was positioned perfectly for lesson planning, while comfortable chairs would be ideal for tutoring students. Tears began forming in her eyes as the impossible reality slowly dawned on her. Manny chose that moment to step through the front door, his own eyes brimming with emotion as he watched his teacher's growing realization. Mrs. Santillan turned toward him with complete bewilderment, her hand covering her mouth as understanding finally broke through her disbelief. The silence stretched between them, filled with decades of gratitude, respect and love that transcended the traditional teacher-student relationship. Mrs. Santillan's legs began trembling as the magnitude of the gift became clear, and Manny moved quickly to steady her as tears of joy streamed down her weathered cheeks. The embrace between teacher and student lasted several minutes, both of them overwhelmed by emotions that had been building for decades. Mrs. Santillan wept freely, her small frame shaking against Manny's chest as the reality of his incredible gift settled into her heart. Years of financial struggle, uncertainty and modest living had suddenly transformed into security, comfort, and dignity that she had never dared to imagine. Manny gently guided her to the comfortable sofa in the living room, where she could sit and process the magnitude of what had just occurred. Through her tears, she began to understand that every detail of the house had been planned specifically for her well-being. The height of the kitchen counters, the placement of the furniture, the selection of books, and even the choice of plants in the garden all reflected intimate knowledge of her preferences and needs. As her initial shock subsided, Mrs. Santillan began exploring her new home with wonder and disbelief. She ran her fingers along the smooth wooden railings that Leopoldo Reyes had crafted with such care, marveling at the quality and attention to detail. In the kitchen, she opened cabinets to discover they had been stocked with all her favorite cooking ingredients and essential household items. The master bedroom brought fresh tears, as she realized she would no longer need to worry about leaking roofs during monsoon seasons. The comfortable mattress and quality linens represented luxury beyond anything she had experienced since her early married years with Vicente. A framed photograph of her late husband sat on the nightstand, somehow obtained and placed there by Manny's thoughtful planning. In the study, Mrs. Santillan discovered teaching materials and educational resources that would allow her to continue mentoring students even in retirement. The desk provided perfect lighting for lesson planning, while the bookshelf contained both professional references and beloved literary works she had mentioned during conversations with Manny. A comfortable reading chair positioned near the window offered the ideal spot for afternoon relaxation. The bathroom's safety features revealed how carefully Manny had considered her advancing age and physical limitations. Grab bars had been installed with discretion, maintaining aesthetic appeal while providing practical support. The shower design accommodated her arthritis concerns, while the medicine cabinet had been organized with her regular medications clearly visible and easily accessible. Outside, the gardens showcased Mariano Cruz's understanding of both beauty and functionality. Raised vegetable beds would provide fresh produce while minimizing the physical strain of gardening. The herb section included plants specifically chosen for their medicinal properties and culinary uses. Fruit trees promised future harvests of mangoes, coconuts, and papayas that would enhance both her nutrition and her connection to the land. As afternoon transitioned to evening, former students began arriving to share in the celebration. Amado Herrera brought his own family to meet the teacher who had inspired his business success, while Rowena Pascual expressed gratitude for the early encouragement that had motivated her nursing career. Each visitor carried stories of how Mrs. Santillan's influence had shaped their lives in meaningful ways. The gathering became an impromptu reunion of souls, connected by shared memories of a classroom where poverty had never diminished dreams or potential. Children who had once struggled to afford school supplies had grown into productive adults who credited their achievements to a teacher who had seen beyond their circumstances to their possibilities. Photographer Íñigo Villanueva captured precious moments throughout the evening, preserving images that would become treasured family heirlooms. The pictures showed Mrs. Santillan surrounded by love, gratitude, and the tangible proof that her lifetime of service had created ripples of positive impact, extending far beyond her imagination. As the celebration concluded and guests departed, Mrs. Santillan and Manny sat together on the veranda, watching the sun set over Sarangani Bay. The boy, who had once shared her lunch because he was hungry, had grown into a man capable of sharing abundance. The teacher, who had given everything despite having little, had received a gift that honored her decades of selfless service. The house represented more than shelter. It embodied the completion of a circle that began with simple kindness in a childhood classroom and had grown into profound gratitude expressed through life-changing generosity.